If you're an indie filmmaker, you've probably spent months, even years, writing, shooting, and editing your film. But what happens next? How do you get your movie in front of audiences? Today, I'm going to be breaking down everything you need to know about indie film distribution, the entire process from start to finish. Whether you're looking for a traditional distributor, self-distributing, or exploring streaming platforms, this guide is going to help you make the right choice. And I want to add a disclaimer before we get started. This video is going to be very, very long. I have over 100 slides that I'm about to share with you guys. There's 10 different sections. So this video is going to feel a little bit overwhelming, especially if you have never heard of any of the things that I'm about to talk about. That's okay. Take a deep breath. That's one of the beauties of YouTube, is that you're able to go back and rewatch things if you don't understand it the first time. I'm also going to have chapters on each of the 10 sections that I'm going to be talking about today, so that way if you need to rewatch anything, it's going to be easy to find. And I'm also considering chopping this video up into smaller sections and releasing those videos too, for somebody who's just like, I can't watch I don't even know how long this video is going to be, but I assume it's going to be over an hour. So if you're like, I can't watch this video over an hour, I'll probably chop these into smaller sections to make them a little bit more consumable. And I also want to say that I'm definitely not an expert in this field. Although I'm going to be talking about a lot of different things, we're really only going to get into the surface level of a lot of these things. And honestly, I haven't worked with a lot of these different methods, so I don't have a complete understanding of them. I have an understanding of them enough to where I can give you kind of a brief explanation, but I would definitely do some further research from here if there's anything that I talk about that I don't completely understand that you want to kind of dive into further. And of course, I'll likely miss something, but if you have any questions about anything, feel free to leave them in the comments or email me. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about in this video, I'm going to tell you what film distribution is and kind of explain the different models there. We're going to be talking about the different revenue models, the types of distributors that you're going to get into, common deliverables, common companies you're going to run into, self-distribution methods, how to get a distributor, some small topics like marketing and things like that, how to avoid bad distributors, and then kind of my wrap up and final thoughts here. So let's go ahead and get into everything. So I put together a slideshow for you guys. This is the first time I've ever done something like this. So it's not going to be the prettiest slideshow. You're probably going to feel like you're back in grade school, but I wanted to, have a more visual element here just because there's just so much information, and I know it'll be helpful to kind of look at it as I'm going over everything. So I want to go over a couple common misconceptions first. If my film is good enough, distributors will come to me. That's definitely not always the case. There's so many different films in the world now. Like, one of the great things about technology in the world we live in today is that making a film is so much easier than it was, 10, 20, 30 years ago. But that also means a lot more people are making more films, and distributors are getting a lot pickier. So just because, you can make a very great film and it can get overlooked by distributors. Self-distribution is only for failed films. This is definitely something that, my whole channel is about, ownership and owning your rights and all of that. And actually a great example of this of a movie that just came out is Sinners. So now we're starting to see this in Hollywood now too, right? So, if you have to go the self-distribution route, you definitely shouldn't feel like a failure. Honestly, I think it's the bolder route to go these days because, you're that person that wants to, do everything, retain their rights. And, I obviously love that. It's very important to me as a filmmaker myself. I need Netflix to succeed. This is definitely not true either. One of the great things about, streaming these days is that there's so many different platforms. And honestly, you don't know where you're going to find your home. You might be gung-ho on, one specific streaming platform, like Tubi's a very hot one right now. Well, you may find that you'll find another home on, something else. I don't know what that is, and I don't want to give examples right now, but you just don't know where you're going to succeed. So that's why it's great to kind of diversify and just get on as many platforms as possible. So let's get into the basics. What is film distribution, right? So simply put, distribution is how your film gets from your hard drive to in front of an audience, right? This can be in theaters, on a TV, through a streaming platform, or direct sales. So it's important for you to know that there are 5 primary types of distribution rights that you're going to want to get familiar with. And a lot of these are going to seem pretty easy to you, but you could absolutely sell each of these off depending on, whoever you're working with. But you have your theatrical rights. So showing it in movie theaters, for an example, that's a whole set of rights. You have your TV and cable rights. So showing it, just like on a cable channel, a network will buy the rights to air your film. You have your streaming rights, which we're going to get into the different types of revenue models there. But you have, like Netflix and Hulu, and then Amazon and iTunes and all of that. Obviously, you have your international rights. So all of these different rights could apply to, foreign markets too, like the theatrical, streaming, cable, and physical media. Like, you're going to primarily sell these to a domestic market, but you could absolutely, sell off those version of those rights to international markets too. And it can even get down to the regional markets too. It gets really crazy. And then you have your physical media, your DVDs, your Blu-rays, collector's editions, etc. So for an example, my film is on Film Hub right now. I have sold off the domestic rights for streaming, and I'm not sure about cable, but as far as I know, I still have the theatrical rights, so I can still show my movie in theaters because they're not, showing any films in theaters via Film Hub, and physical media, so I can sell Blu-rays, DVDs, all of that. So they primarily just have the streaming rights, and I gave them worldwide rights, which we'll get more into here in a second, but streaming through international markets too. So there's kind of a real world example of what I was just kind of talking about. And then you have what's called exclusive and non-exclusive rights. So what's the difference? When signing a distribution deal, you're often going to need to decide between exclusive and non-exclusive rights. And this determines whether the distributor has sole control over the film's distribution in a specific territory, or if you can work with multiple distributors. So for an example, with Film Hub, it's supposed to be non-exclusive. So if they don't offer a particular platform, they say if they offer a platform that you can't go off and distribute with another distributor on your own, at least to my understanding. I haven't looked enough into the contract to see if I could, if I'm not, I'm on Amazon, right? And I got on Amazon before I got on Film Hub. They've kind of changed things at this point, but because of the non-exclusive deal, I'm able to keep my Amazon rights, streaming to Amazon rights myself, and then they pretty much have every other platform. So it's pretty much a non-exclusive deal, but now they're kind of getting finicky as far as like what platforms you're able to actually distribute on. But overall, it's pretty much a non-exclusive agreement. Whereas if you're going to work with a distributor, say like a traditional distributor, so let's just say this is an extreme example, but Disney, right? So if Disney's like, we want to distribute your film, but we want exclusive rights to every type of platform, theatrical, streaming, cable, etc., right? You can't take your film to another distributor and be like, hey, can you sell off these rights elsewhere? They want the whole pie, right? So that's kind of the difference there. So as I explained, exclusive rights, the distributor has sole distribution control in the specified region. You can't license or sell your film to any other distributor or platform in that territory. And this is pretty common with traditional distribution deals, right? So the pros of this, more marketing effort up front, so they have more incentive to promote your film. They're going to put a lot more marketing dollars behind it, which is not always the case. But, if you're working like with a major distributor, that's usually going to be the case. You don't have to do as much work on your own. You get bigger upfront payments, so potential for a minimum guarantee or a higher licensing fee, which means you're just going to see a lot more money in the long run. The cons is that you obviously have a lot less flexibility and you lose the ability to negotiate with other distributors in that region. And then long-term lock-ins, so some exclusive deals can be 7 to 15 years, which is very, very common. So you just won't be able to, if you're unhappy with your deal, you're not really, unless there's a clause in your contract that says you can cancel at any time or whatever. You're locked in for 7 to 15 years on, whatever that deal is. So you can't take your film anywhere else for that time period, right? Whereas non-exclusive, you retain the ability to license your film to multiple distributors or platforms in the same territory, and more common with self-distribution or aggregator services, which we'll get into more later. So the pros here, obviously great flexibility. You can work with multiple distributors, maximizing your reach. You have diversified income streams, earning different money from platforms or regions simultaneously. But the cons here, less just distributor commitment. So they're going to put less effort into marketing your film. So that's going to be more on you. And, market saturation. So your film could appear on too many platforms, although I don't know if there's really such thing as too many platforms, because like I said, you just don't know where your audience is going to land, but it can make it feel less exclusive if that is important to you. So let's go ahead and break down real quick the different revenue models when it comes to streaming. So with streaming, you're going to have 3 different options. You're going to have TVOD, SVOD, and AVOD. So TVOD, or transactional video on demand, which basically means pay-per-view or rental-based streaming. Your audience pays per rental or purchase. An example of this is if your film is on Amazon, for an example, your consumer will be able to buy or rent your film, right? This works best for filmmakers who have strong niche audiences who are willing to buy or rent that film. So think like your horror movie fans, or maybe, like Christian-based or faith-based movie fans. They're more likely to kind of go out of their way to buy or rent your film instead of expecting it to be on streaming. And then with revenue, you usually keep a percentage after each sale after the platform's cut. So for an example, if you're streaming directly on Amazon, which really isn't a thing anymore, but I know there are some people like myself still out there. If somebody rents my film, I will get 50% of that revenue, right? So if somebody rents it for $3, I'll make $1.50 of that. Now that's pretty much the case with everywhere else. It's typically about 30%. You can expect typically about 30 to 50%, depending on the platform. And then we have SVOD, subscription video on demand. So I'm sure everybody's really familiar with this one. It says flat fee subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. But if you're working with a small distributor and an aggregator, you're probably not going to get a flat fee unless you just, strike an amazing deal. But viewers pay a monthly fee for an unlimited access. So Netflix is obviously the primary example here. You pay, I think it's like $22 now a month for Netflix, and then you would get a percentage of that typically. But they also can offer flat fees up front. That's a lot more common with bigger movies, but that requires a licensing deal. So you won't get paid per view, but you'll get an upfront payment for a set number of times. So let's just say, for an example, Netflix is like, we're going to license your movie for X number of dollars, and this term is going to last for 3 years or something like that. So they'll pay this amount of money for your film for that amount of time. Once that time is up, you can, if they want to continue to play your film, you can renegotiate your terms. But for smaller subscription video on demand platforms, you're usually just getting a percentage of the subscription fee that people pay. So you're not going to make very much with this method. So for an example, like with my film, with FilmHub, I'm on several subscription video on demand platforms, and I don't make very much there. Like I make next to nothing. So honestly, it's not a great platform for like if you're making like a no budget film, or maybe even, something under $100,000, just because like unless you just get that upfront deal, it's just not going to happen. You got to have talent behind it, or won some major award or something. I don't know, because I've never been in this position, right? So it's not great for smaller filmmakers, but like I said, it is great if you can get that fee, to get on the platform. But it's pretty uncommon for filmmakers, at least at the level that I'm making films at. And then we have AVOD, which is currently my favorite way of making money with my movie right now. Ad-supported video on demand. So basically, these streaming platforms are free to watch on, but supported by ads. So you can think YouTube, Tubi, Roku channel, etc., where I don't even think you have to sign up for an account. You can just go straight to the streaming platform, play the movie, and then you will get paid based on how many ads are put in front of that movie. So, like I said, viewers don't pay anything. The ads generate the revenue. This works great for filmmakers who want exposure and long-term revenue streams. You get to share the ad revenue based on views. It's less money than TVOD or SVOD if you're getting a streaming deal or a licensing deal on SVOD, but it's easier to access large audiences. So, the Tubi boom that's been happening over the last couple of years, that's how a lot of people are generating a lot of revenue, just because, a lot of people don't want to pay for streaming services anymore, and just it's easier just to suck it up and watch ads, I guess, for a lot of these films. The way that they generate, or the way that they kind of calculate how much you make, is you'll make what's called a CPM, which stands for cost per milli. So for YouTube, for an example, like on these videos, I will get paid a certain ad rate based on every 1,000 views. So for an example, I would say my average rate is probably like $5 or something like that per 1,000 views. So every 1,000 views that I get, I will make that $5, right? Something along those lines. I don't know how Tubi's works 100%, but it's got to be something in that realm. So you'll get paid based on how many ads are shown and how many views you have, and that sort of thing. Basically, you need a lot of views to make money with this method. So marketing is definitely key here. So just to kind of sum this up really quick, which one is best if you have an audience that's willing to pay? And this is typically how streamers will start to, like, you'll notice as I kind of talk about these things, like, pay attention to how movies show up on your different streaming platforms. So for an example, I have, like HBO Max, I have Netflix, I have Disney Plus and Hulu, and I have Amazon Prime, but I also, like, rent films through like Vudu or Amazon. Pay attention to how, the process in which the films come out. So you'll have your theatrical movie, and then once theatrical is done, you'll see it come up on SVOD. So you'll be able to buy or rent it on like Vudu or Amazon or somewhere else that, let you buy or rent new release films, right? And then after a certain period of time, you'll see those films show up on streaming. So like, for an example, a movie I watched recently that I kind of saw this progress with was the movie Heretic, the Hugh Grant horror movie. So that movie came out on theaters, and then it was available for purchase or rental, which is how I ended up watching the film. I missed it in theaters just because apparently nobody went to see it because it was in my movie theater for like a week or so. So I didn't even get the chance to watch it. And then, like, I'd say a couple weeks after I watched it, from renting it, it showed up on HBO Max. So it went from theatrical to TVOD to SVOD. And then at some point when the streaming revenue kind of runs out, they'll probably put it out on AVOD, right? So you might see it pop up on a Tubi or somewhere else, right? But AVOD is typically like way down the line for Hollywood features, but it could be a lot more common to do that sooner with smaller features. If you can get a streamer to pay a licensing fee, I mean, SVOD is definitely a great method too. I wouldn't expect a big payday with this method, but it is certainly great. And this is another thing, you can negotiate too, is that streamer going to be the exclusive platform that can pay your movie? Well, that can play your movie. So they're going to have to pay a lot more money up front, right? Whereas if you're doing a non-exclusive deal, maybe they want to pay a little bit less, but you can take that movie and, stream it somewhere else as well, right? So that's a great way to rack up, multiple different revenue streams if you're going that route. Or like I said, if somebody wants to be exclusive, well, if they want to be exclusive means more dollars, right? Which is really nice. And if you have gotten this kind of deal before, I would love to talk to you. So definitely reach out to me if you've ever gotten like a SVOD streaming deal. I would love to learn more about that. If you want passive income and exposure, AVOD, which again, for somebody at my budget level, it makes the most sense. AVOD just makes the most sense. So I'm definitely a lover of AVOD right now. Tubi's obviously paid me a lot of money on my movie, and it continues to be. it's not the best revenue stream for me right now. I mean, it is my best revenue stream right now. It's really my only one, but it was paying more about a year ago. It's still doing pretty okay now. Like it's still like, it's not making like pennies. I think like right now this month it's made like $100 or something. So it's not the most money, but it's definitely, not nothing too, right? So now let's get into understanding territory rights, right? So territory rights refer to the geographical regions where a distributor has all the rights to sell, stream, and exhibit your film. You sign a distribution deal. You're granting the distributor the exclusive or non-exclusive license to distribute your film in specific regions or countries. Territory rights can specifically impact your film's revenue potential, as different regions have different market values and distribution opportunities. It's pretty much going to work exactly the same as how I talked about before. You're going to have your theatrical, you'll have your streaming, cable, obviously not international because we're talking about international, and then your physical, right? So you have your domestic rights, which was going to cover your home country. So for a US based filmmaker like myself, that's typically going to be the United States and Canada or North America. Just for easier reference, they typically refer to it as North America. And then that may include platforms like Prime, Apple TV, Hulu, that cater to a domestic audience. So your platform, it could depend on your region too. And then your revenue potential, the US is a major market, but obviously competition is fierce. And then domestic distribution is obviously more accessible for independent films. Then you have your international, so covers distribution outside of your home country, often sold as a regional package. So as I mentioned previously, North America is typically the US and Canada. Then you could have Europe, which would be like the Western, Eastern, and other specific countries, Asia Pacific, China, Japan, Australia, etc., Latin America, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, etc. And actually, like with Film Hub, you can actually break this down by country if you really, really want to get that specific. I don't really recommend doing that, but you absolutely could. So that's one of the benefits of Film Hub is you can get hyper specific on which territories you want to or not distribute to, which is really nice. Whereas, if you're working with like a traditional distributor, you're kind of just signing away everything, right? And then your revenue potential, some regions like Europe or Asia can be very lucrative for niche or genre films, but it does require some localized marketing and subtitling, or honestly, even dubbing. So localizing would be, like changing some things up in the film, specifically dubbing, so changing the language. But sometimes Hollywood features will actually change like parts of the script or the way it's edited to fit, the audience of a specific country. This is very common for distributing films out in China. So you may go see Avengers in the United States and it could be a little bit different if you go watch it in China, right? You're probably not going to have that happen with a film at our size, but it's not completely uncommon either. And then, of course, you have your simple worldwide rights, which is where the distributor acquires the rights to distribute your film globally. This is common for larger distributors that have networks in multiple regions. And then your revenue potential is obviously it can lead to broader exposure, but you'll likely receive a smaller share of the profits due to large-scale distribution. And then the risk of losing control over certain region is if the distributor doesn't actively promote your film. If you are looking to be completely hands-off in the distribution process or just trying to keep it as simple as possible, this is going to be your best bet. But if you are a little more targeted and you have the resources to kind of target specific regions, then obviously it makes sense to kind of, just do things off on your own. But honestly, I mean, this is what I did worldwide. Just keep it simple. And then, of course, I won't go over this again. You can read the slide if you really want to, but then you got your exclusive and non-exclusive territory rights, right? So it's not going to work any different than, what I talked about before with the domestic, non-exclusive, and exclusive, but you can do this for each region too. So let's talk briefly about how territory rights can impact your distribution deal. So the revenue splits could be different by region. So some distributors offer different revenue splits depending on the territory. An example would be like 70-30, 70 to you, 30 to the distributor in North America, but a 60-40 split in Europe. You could have territory-specific platforms, so certain streaming services or TV networks can only operate in specific regions. An example, Sky TV in the UK, Canal Plus in France, or Foxtel in Australia. Regional marketing requirements. As I had mentioned before, distributors may require localized marketing materials such as translated posters, trailers, and subtitles. And then the territory windows, some distributors could request staggered releases across territories. So for an example, they may want to start a North America release earlier in the year. So on the example on the slide, starting that in January 2025, and then later, a couple months later, releasing it in Europe, and then later in the year in the Asia Pacific markets. So here's a couple tips for negotiating your territory rights if you want to do that, right? Or maybe there's part of the deal that you don't necessarily like. But like I said, if you're looking just to keep things simple, then just, whatever they give you is whatever they give you, right? But do your research. Research what regions are most profitable for your genre. So if you are making a horror film, maybe horror films are not, super popular in, one market. So it doesn't make sense to distribute in that market, right? But it's really popular in this other market. So you want to get a great deal in that market. So make sure you're researching these things if that's important to you. So horror films often perform well in Europe and Asia. Documentaries may have more success in North America and the UK, especially depending on the topic. So maybe some topics just don't play well in other foreign markets, whereas some others will play very well in others. So just something to keep in mind there. And then retain the rights to regions you can distribute yourself. So if you want to, just do domestic, that's completely okay if that's, okay with the distributor. But if you plan to self-distribute it in certain regions, negotiate to retain those rights. An example, you sell the North American rights to distributor, but keep the international rights to sell directly. Beware of long-term exclusivity. So some distributors lock in filmmakers for long terms for, exclusive territory deals. Like I mentioned before, it could be very long, like something like this on my slides is 10 to 15 years, but it could be 7. I mean, I've seen deals up to 30 years. So just keep that in mind. Always negotiate for a reasonable contract length. 3 to 7 years is definitely a lot more standard. If they're getting up there beyond the 7 years, that's when things get a little sketchy, unless, they're just a great partner to work with. But honestly, like if they were a great partner to work with, they'd have better terms in their contracts, right? Negotiate the revenue splits by territory. Don't accept a blanket revenue split across all territories. So do your research, see what makes the most sense. Ask for higher revenue percentages in regions where you expect better performance. So if one region, like North America, performs really well and it's like, we'll give you a 70-30 split, but there's another region, they're like, we'll do a 50-50, but you're like, I know this region's going to do very well. See if you can bump that up to 60-40, 70-30 like in your North America. So to kind of wrap this up, some key takeaways. Territory rights define where your film can be distributed and who controls it. You can sell domestic, international, and worldwide rights depending on your deal. Exclusive rights offer more marketing potential but limit your flexibility, while non-exclusive rights provide a lot more freedom to you. Carefully negotiate revenue splits and contract lengths by region, or just honestly in general. Retain control of certain territories if you plan to self-distribute or seek multiple deals. Make things simple, or like I said before, just make things simple for yourself and just sign all of your rights away. And then a final pro tip when negotiating, clarify which regions are included, which should be in your contract, but make sure you ask specifically. Some distributors may claim broad territories, but only actively distribute in a few, and ask for detailed reporting on which regions your film are actively being sold in. Before we move on, I wanted to quickly go over some of the ways that you can support me. The easiest way is subscribing to my channel and watching my latest videos. I've also started a membership program that gives you early access to videos before they go live. It starts at just $3 a month on YouTube and Patreon, and if memberships aren't your thing, you can buy individual posts directly on Patreon without the membership fee. My feature film Cashing Out is available to watch on major platforms like Amazon and Apple TV, and you can even watch for free on platforms like Tubi, Plex, and YouTube. If you want to support directly, there's a pay what you want option on my own OTT platform that starts at just $2. And if you do watch the film, it would mean the world to me to leave a review on IMDb, Letterboxd, or your favorite platform. Lastly, if you're interested in my future film projects, you can sign up for my email list. I have some exciting new films that I can't wait to share with you all. All of these items will be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for the support. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, so that wraps up section 1. So let's get into section 2, understanding revenue splits and distribution. All right, I probably shouldn't start it with this one because it's less common than the other method. But number 1, a minimum guarantee. How this works, a distributor will pay you a lump sum upfront in exchange for the rights to distribute your film, either globally or within specific territories. I feel like this is a lot more common in music. There's actually a clip that I saw of Jelly Roll, the musician Jelly Roll, talking about, a deal that he made, or a deal that he knew of, or something like that, or a common just deal in the music industry where like a record label will pay you a fee up front. So say like $500,000, but then they'll start charging expenses on the back end before you start seeing any revenue from whatever your agreed split is. That's basically what this is. Unfortunately, like I said, this is very, very uncommon these days. It's starting to come back a little bit depending on the platform. But if you are getting a minimum guarantee, just know that's probably the only money you're ever going to see, from your release. So if make sure it covers whatever, your budget is, or whatever you got to pay your investors back if you decide to go this route. So like if a distributor's like, if you made your movie for $100,000 and the distributor's like, we'll give you $1,000 minimum guarantee, that's obviously garbage, right? That's not going to really help you. But to continue, once the film is released, the distributor will recoup the minimum guarantee, or MG as it's commonly referred to, from the revenue before paying you any additional earnings. The MG is deducted from future royalties until the distributor makes back the advance, only that after you begin earning any additional revenue. So for an example, a distributor offers you a $100,000 minimum guarantee for North American rights. Your film earns $300,000 in a gross, while the distributor recoups the $100,000 first. So, now that $300,000 turns into $200,000, and then along with expenses and their revenue split before you see an additional profit. So let's just say they charge like 50, just to make these numbers simple, they'll charge $50,000 in marketing expenses, right? And this may be ongoing too. So if this happens, you'll need to ask for receipts to make sure they're being honest about what they're spending. But, it'll be, say you have like a 50, to make these numbers simple, let's just say you have a 50-50 split with the distributor. That's a terrible deal, but let's just keep it simple so I can do the math easily. So if your film earns $300,000, first they're going to take out that $100,000 from that minimum guarantee to pay themselves back. So now your revenue is only $200,000. And then after that, they charge the marketing expenses, which they need to recoup back first. So $50,000, like I mentioned. So now that $300,000 went down to $200,000, and with minus $50,000, that brings it down to $150,000, right? And then after that, that is when you start seeing your revenue split, which would be the 50-50. So their 50% doesn't even go into all the fees that I talked about. You got to pay back everything else before you start even making your revenue split. So we have a 50-50 deal now down. The revenue is now $150,000. So we would make $75,000. Well, this is an extreme example because I'm using big numbers. But if your film only makes $5,000, well, then you could start seeing the problem of not seeing any money, which is very common for filmmakers. So if a filmmaker's like, my distributor sucks, I never see any money, that's why. Because if they got a minimum guarantee, which they probably didn't, but the expenses is a lot more common. So if a distributor's like, we're going to charge you $10,000 in marketing expenses, and your film only makes $5,000, and that's the only money it makes ever, then you're never going to see a dime of that money. And that's why filmmakers will say, I never get paid. I've never gotten paid from my movie or whatever, right? So the pros of the minimum guarantee is that it's guaranteed income. You'll receive money up front. But like I said, that's probably the only revenue you're ever going to see. Risk reduction. So it provides immediate funding to pay off production debts or invest in marketing or just pay your investors back if you had any investors. And then industry validation, getting an MG signals that the distributor has confidence in your film's earning potential, which is definitely a positive, right? But the cons are the long recoup period. The distributor takes all the revenue until the MG is recouped, which could take months or years. Potential no back-end profit, like I had mentioned before. Loss of rights. In some cases, you may be giving up long-term distribution rights in exchange for the MG. So you may be getting they may say like, hey, we'll give you $100,000, but, we want a 30-year term on exclusivity, right? So, if your distributor sucks and you never make any money, well, then you can't do anything with your movie for 30 years, right? Which is, that's a whole mortgage on a house. So that's not always great. So if you are taking an MG, just make sure it's either making you money and expect that that'll be the only money that you make, or it at least needs to cover your initial costs, and then everybody gets paid back. Now, the most common method would be revenue splits after expenses. So how this works, you and the distributor agree on a revenue split. So in the example that I mentioned previously, just to keep it simple, 70 or 50-50, but a more common revenue split is 70-30 in the industry. I would say that's probably the most common with a traditional distributor, but you could have a 60-40 deal. You could have a 50-50 deal depending on who you're working with. All of my examples are going to be 50-50 just for easy math. But the distributor deducts their expenses first, which can include marketing costs, such as creating the trailers, posters, and the ads. And this is if they are doing all that for you. So some, distributors will create these marketing materials for you so you don't have to do it. Sales fees, so expenses for attending film markets, which obviously there are certain fees there, but, if they're buying a giant ribeye steak at the most expensive steakhouse at Cannes, then they're going to bill that to you, essentially. Legal fees and administrative fees, which that should be pretty, simple. And then delivery costs, converting the film to the required formats. So if they're creating the deliverables for you and then delivering those deliverables to the different platforms, which can have some costs too, which probably a legitimate cost, but you don't know what they're charging either unless, they're giving you a breakdown, which traditional distributors are notorious for not giving breakdowns, but we'll talk about that more later. So after these expenses are recouped, then the remaining revenue split happens according to the contract terms. So for an example, your film generates $500,000 in revenue. The distributor spends $200,000 on expenses, whether that's marketing, delivery, etc. So the remaining $300,000 is split 50-50 to keep this simple, right? Giving you $100,000. So there's some basics there. So if you're like, why my movie made $50,000, why am I not getting $250,000 of that? Well, that's why, because they need to, according to the contract terms, they need to recoup their expenses first. The pros of this is that there's no upfront rights sales, so you retain a lot more ownership and control since there's no lump sum payout. Potential for higher long-term profits. If your film performs well, you can make more over time compared to one-time minimum guarantee. This is less risky for distributors, so they don't have to pay anything up front, making them more likely to take on smaller indie films. Cons, delayed earnings. You might have to wait months or years to see a profit, especially depending on what they decide to charge for expenses. Opaque accounting. Some distributors inflate or pad their expenses, reducing the amount of back-end profit you receive, more famously known as Hollywood accounting. But like I said, if that distributor, that sales agent from the distribution company goes to Cannes and, buys a $1,500 dinner that they didn't really need to buy, but they could do that, they're going to charge you for that. And you may have no idea that they charge you for that, because unless you get like a complete breakdown of what they spent, you're going to have no idea. Now that could be split up between several films, but you could still see the problem there, especially if somebody's greedy. Lack of guaranteed payment. If the film underperforms, obviously you may never see a dime. I mean, you may never see a dime regardless, but if the film just doesn't perform, you may never see a dime. But when is it worth it? Revenue splits make sense if you believe in your film's long-term earning potential. And if you have a solid marketing plan and are confident you could help drive sales, you could ultimately make more with a split than a minimum guarantee. So I guess I'm kind of an example of this. I'm not in the profit region yet. I'm pretty freaking close, but I haven't had a minimum guarantee. I just did with Film Hub. They do it an 80-20 split. So 80% to me, 20% to them. And I've made, I think, almost 11,000 back of my about $16,000 budget. So I still got to make about $5,000 left, but almost 2/3. I think I've made over 2/3 of the budget back. So, it's possible with the right marketing and the right film, right? I mean, if I could do it with a no budget indie drama, I'm sure you could do it with a horror movie that costs $1,000. So things you need to watch out for with your distribution deal. And this is going to be really important. So I would definitely pay attention to this section quite a bit. When negotiating with distributors, be aware of the terms and conditions surrounding both minimum guarantees and revenue splits. Key things to look out for include recoupable expenses. So ensure the content specifies what kind of expenses are recoupable, and caps. This is a big one, that it caps excessive costs. So, if they go and spend lavishly, you could say, well, our deal is that you could only spend $10,000 on marketing, but you're charging me for $15,000. Well, that extra $5,000 is on you guys, not on me, kind of thing. So there should be caps, and if there isn't a cap, you need to make sure you negotiate that cap in your contract. Without a cap, distributors could inflate expenses, making it harder for you to see any profit. Or like I said, famously, that's what Hollywood accounting is. Transparent reporting. Ask for regular and detailed reports on revenue and expenses. Now, a place like Indie Rights is notoriously known for having great reporting, but they don't charge any expenses. So you're just going to get the revenue expense. They don't charge you anything for expenses, which is really nice. For traditional distributors, this is going to be very difficult to get from them. They're notorious for just not doing this. So make sure you're doing your research before working with somebody if this is important to you. If you're just like, I'm just going to trust whatever they say, then I guess this all doesn't really matter. But if this is important to you, then this is something you need to ask for when, if you want to see that breakdown and making sure that they're honest. You could get some lawyers involved, but there's always some sort of shadiness to where they can kind of get around it. But I have heard if you harass people enough, and it, could get to a point, like I've heard of people who've had to walk into somebody's office and demand a report before they saw a report or a check or something. That's just the game. It sucks, which is why I haven't worked with a traditional distributor. And if I ever do in the future, they need to be really great, especially with everything I know. Ensure that you have the right to audit the distributor's records to prevent accounting abuse. So that's kind of what I was talking about. Territorial rights, make sure you retain the right to negotiate deals in other territories if you're only selling regional rights. So, if you're only interested in distributing in North America, make sure they don't have a section in there that's like, but we can actually distribute. We have the rights to everywhere else, so you can't do that yourself. Make sure you're paying attention to things like that. And this obviously prevents you from losing potential income from international sales. And then obviously the big one, the length of the agreement. Check the contract's term length. Some distributors lock in rights for 10 to 15 years, limiting your future earnings. Opt for shorter term deals like 3 to 5 years whenever possible. And they do exist. So just make sure you keep that in mind. It's fine if you want to renew with them, but just try to opt for those shorter deals if possible, because 15 years is a very long time. So key takeaways with choosing between MGs and revenue splits. For one, if an MG, if they even offer it to you, otherwise this doesn't really matter, but go with a minimum guarantee if you want guaranteed payment up front. Need funding immediately to pay off production debts, or, if you funded the film yourself, to go into another project. And if you're unsure about the film's long-term potential earnings, right? Option for a revenue split, this is probably going to be the more common method regardless, especially if you're watching this channel and making the films at the level that I'm talking about. If you believe in your film can earn consistently over time, prefer retaining more control and ownership, and you're confident that your ability to market and promote the film yourself. Okay, so that was a very long section. Let's get into the types of distribution here. So the first type is going to be the most common. It's traditional distribution, which means you're working with an actual distributor. How it works is a distributor buyer leases your film, then handles marketing and the release. Some provide upfront payments like minimum guarantees, but many don't. How you can attract a distributor would be submitting to film festivals, but this really only gets down to like the major ones at this point. So Sundance, TIFF, South by Southwest, are really going to be your only places to probably find distribution. So just kind of keep that in mind. So I wouldn't really rely on that. If you are at, like the no budget level, you're probably not going to find distribution through a festival, but you could. It might be a boutique distributor. You absolutely could. I don't want to say it's never happened. It's just extremely uncommon at this point. You could hire a sales agent or a producer's rep to pitch your film. So a sales agent or a producer's rep, they're not going to make any money until they sell the film. They'll take a percentage, but basically they'll go and just pitch your film to different distributors or platforms or whatever. Or you can network with distributors at events like American film markets. You can do this yourself if you want to. You could act as your own, sales agent or producer's rep, right? And just go straight to these film markets. Anybody can go to these film markets. It's not like you have to be, I take that back. I don't know that. I don't know if you need some sort of credentials, but I'm pretty sure you can just go and, just represent yourself if you wanted to. So the pros of traditional distribution, it can be less marketing responsibility for you, depending on the distributor. Potential for wider distribution, upfront money if they offer in advance. But like I said, that's rare today. The cons are the revenue splits are generally not good, depending on the distributor. I think the most common revenue split, like I said before, is 70-30. Long exclusivity periods, you might lose your rights for years. Common deals are 7 to 15 years. Some distributors, and I put that in quotes, distributors are scams. Watch for hidden fees, like I talked about. The next type would be aggregators or middlemen services, which is becoming a lot more common today. So what do? Aggregators help get your film on the different streaming platforms like Apple TV, Amazon, Google Play, Tubi, and more. Popular aggregators would be something like Film Hub, although they don't really consider themselves to be an aggregator, but they're really an aggregator. You have Quiver Digital, which is a pay per submission. Bitmax, which is a flat fee per platform, which I'll get into more of these here shortly. The pros, it's good for filmmakers who want VOD or video on demand distribution without a traditional deal. More control over pricing and availability. The cons, some distributors require high upfront costs, and there's typically no marketing included. You're going to have to do all the marketing stuff yourself. And then last, we have the DIY, do-it-yourself / self-distribution method. How this works with self-distribution, you sell your film directly to your audience without involving a distributor or aggregator. You control the pricing, availability, and marketing, but you're also responsible for handling sales, customer support, and promotion. This path requires more effort, but offers the potential for higher profits and creative freedom, so something to keep in mind. So some popular self-distribution options would be something like Vimeo on Demand, which is something that I actually use and I've made a video about, so definitely check that out. You can sell or rent your film with a customizable pricing. Vimeo takes, I wrote 10 to 15%, but it's really 10% per sale. And then you can also embed a player directly on your website if you want to, which is really nice. So if I refer to a Vimeo OTT platform, Vimeo on Demand is basically what I'm talking about here. You can create your own website or e-commerce platform and sell digital downloads directly through there, or on a place like Gumroad or Sellify. I haven't really heard of these two. I did some research on them, but apparently you can do this if you want to. But I'd say uploading or doing the digital downloads directly on your own website is probably a better method. But if you want your own, or if you want somebody else to kind of handle that, and then you just kind of take in whatever the split is, you could absolutely do that. And then you keep 100% of the revenue minus payment processing fees. So if you're using something like Stripe, it's like 2.9% plus some fee per transaction. So it's pretty minimal. Or if you're like me, you can sling Blu-rays and DVDs, on the side. I've definitely done that as well. And then you don't have to pay any fees. If you're taking cash, well, you're keeping 100% of that cash, right? And then you have four-walling or theatrical self-distribution. You can rent a theater and screen the film yourself. You can keep all the ticket revenue minus what you paid for the theater, obviously, but you're responsible for marketing and event costs. And this is great for, localized screenings or special event screenings. So for myself, for an example, I kind of did like a cross between a few of these methods. So obviously I've distributed through Film Hub, but before that I was self-distributing on Amazon. So that was nice. I was able to upload directly to Amazon, which you can't do anymore. I'm on Vimeo on demand, so I'm directly selling through my own platform with that, which is really nice. I'm not selling through my own website anymore, but I did sell Blu-rays and digital copies at one point on my own website. So I just created like a simple store, and people were able to purchase the film, and then I would ship it out myself. Or, like I've done Comic-Cons, so I've gone directly to the consumer, sold through that, just selling directly to friends and family, right? They're like, hey, let me get a copy. I'm like, okay, $20 or whatever. They give me cash, I give them the movie. So there's a whole lot of that. That's why I say, like, you want to, diverse, or you want to make sure you're not selling off all your rights completely. Like if if the distributor has no interest in doing, a theatrical release, then don't sell off your theatrical rights, because then you can take those rights and go do your own screening, which is what I did. I put my movie in a theater locally, and it did pretty well, which was nice. So if I sold off those rights, I would have never been able to do my local screenings. And while, if you saw my breakdown of how much money I've made from my film cashing out, you'll know I never saw that money, but I did make I made like $2,000 from screenings. Now there was some costs there with creating the DCPs and the posters and all that, but still, like, I made money doing that. I didn't lose a ton of money overall with that method. But if I signed off those rights, I wouldn't have been able to do that. If I signed off the physical rights, I couldn't do a Blu-ray and sell that off on my own, right? But that's only if that's important to you. So just keep that in mind. I'm very hands-on. I want to dip my toes in a bunch of different places, right? And just learn. So, I have a bunch of different methods on just how I do things overall. And I still have these rights, right? I could still screen cashing out in a movie theater. I can still sell my own Blu-rays if I want to. So nothing's changed there. I don't do it anymore just because it's not making any money. Although it's been 5 years since Cashing Out came out, so maybe a 5-year anniversary screening would be fun. Maybe 10 years makes more sense. But, that's something I have the choice to make that, right? So that's great. So the pros of the DIY / self-distribution: full creative control. You control the pricing, distribution, and marketing strategies. So if you're very hands-on, this is a great method for you. And that, like I said, this is the route I primarily took. Higher revenue potential. You keep a larger share of the profits. There are no distributors or aggregators taking a cut. And then you have a direct audience connection. You build direct relationship with your fans, which can help you with future projects. So this is something that's very important to me. It's probably the route that I'm going to continue to take, unless, I would like to get some experience with traditional distribution just so I have that. But I would rather have that direct audience connection like I was just talking about, because I think that helps you better in the long run, especially when you're a filmmaker at my level. Like if you're in Hollywood making big budget films, who cares? But somebody at my level, you got to be a little closer to your audience. The cons: heavy marketing responsibility. You're fully responsible for promoting your own film, which requires a lot of time and effort. And people just think like, oh, I wrote on Facebook about my movie. Oh, I wrote on Twitter. I did a couple tweets about my movie. I marketed it. There's a lot more to it, which we'll talk about here shortly. and I will make videos about in the future. But marketing a film is a lot of work, and that's honestly, marketing is why most films fail overall. Limited reach without a distributor's network, you'll struggle to get on major platforms like Apple or Amazon. Upfront cost, you may need to invest in advertising, build a website, or pay for event spaces. So, like when I did the Comic-Con, I had to pay for event space, which wasn't very much, but it is a fee. Theatrical, obviously had some fees with the DCPs, creating posters, paid ads, etc. Building the website. There's a lot of things you can do for free now. So, like when I'm, just 5 years ago when I was, doing all this for my film, there was a lot less resources, I would say, but you can do a lot of this for free now. Now, it's not always going to be the most professional looking things. Like you might have to build like a free Wix site or only use a Linktree profile as your website. I think that's fine, as long as I think the connection to the audience is a lot more important than how good your website looks. But, if you do have the resources to invest a little money in it, it's not the end of the world. At this point, like I don't pay for a website anymore. Like I did for years, and I just never saw a return on investment with it. So I just stopped paying for it. I just have a Linktree profile now with all of my links. Like I still have a free Wix website that exists, but it's not like I don't see the need to pay for it right now. Like there's no point. I could just put just a redirect link or something, or create like a bit.ly link with a unique tag at the end, like cashing out bit.ly.com/cashing out film, something like that. It's not the best method in the world, but it's free. And, I'm not wasting a ton of money on something that's just not giving me a return on investment. Now, I pay for all the domains still, so I have those, but, I don't pay the recurring fee for, the website hosting. So a couple pro tips: if you're planning on self-distributing, considering offer special bundles like film plus behind the scenes content or commentary tracks. This is something I did with my film. Offered a commentary track to increase the perceived value and boost sales. Then leverage email lists, social media, and partnerships to drive traffic to your website or storefront. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys. I started this YouTube channel as a way to build an audience for my creative projects. Like that's the whole reason I'm here. I want to provide value, but that's kind of my exchange, my value exchange. I'm making this super long, detailed video about film distribution in hope that people are going to watch my movie. So that's kind of the value exchange here, right? I'm trying to build an audience for my brand, my movies, etc., and I'm giving you guys information. Now, I don't know if you guys are the right audience for what I'm doing, but this is the way I know how to do it right now. So if I got to change course eventually, that's fine, but I'm going to build one audience first, and we'll just see how things go in the future. Again, I don't know if that's the best method, but that's the method I'm using right now. All right, so that wraps up section 3. Let's get into section 4, common deliverables for distribution. Okay, so first, what are deliverables? If you've never heard the word deliverables before, you're like, what the hell is he even talking about? So deliverables are the required assets and material you must provide to a distributor or platform when signing a distribution deal. So this can include the film itself, promotional materials, legal documents, technical files necessary for the distributor to market and release your film. Having your deliverables prepared in advance speeds up the distribution process and shows you're organized and professional. So let's actually get into the different deliverables that you may, and this is not standard across every platform. Some may require more, some may require less. This is just kind of a basic list of deliverables that you can expect to have to create. So obviously the film itself, otherwise known as the master files, ProRes or a DNx HD master file are typically the most common. I would say ProRes is even more common than this. It's definitely the preferred method across pretty much every platform. Every platform, streaming platform or distributor will take ProRes. I will tell you that. So having the highest quality export of your film, typically ProRes 422 HQ or DNx HD, 185 plus format, frame rate in 23.9 frames per second, 24 frames per second, or 29.97 or 30 frames per second, depending on the region. And then the typical resolution, the most common resolution is going to be HD 1920 by 1080. Some will offer 4K, but I would say most distributors don't take 4K, but you could have a 4K file ready, if possible. And that's typically, that's a 16 by 9 file. So like if you shot in the scope aspect ratio, so the wide format, you may have black bars on the top and the bottom, and you may have to do like Film Hub, I believe, requires the native format, so they don't want the letterbox. That's called letterboxing. If you got the typical aspect ratio and you got the black bars on the top and the bottom, they don't always want that. They want it just to fit the screen, and then the platform will format accordingly. But I would say the 16 by 9, 19 by 20, or 3840 by 2160, definitely the most common. If you're doing a theatrical release, a DCP, digital cinema package, they may require a DCP. You can make a DCP for free. You can actually make a DCP on Resolve for free, which is nice. And then there's another DCP place. I forgot what it's called, but I used it. It's like an open source DCP program that I actually used it for cashing out. This is the industry standard format for digital theatrical screenings. So actually, I wish I had my hard drive so I can show you what a DCP looks like. Actually, I'll dig it out real quick. Okay, so this is how extra I am. So I used to work in a movie theater, and then we would get, I went through, this is what I say, like when I went through a learning process, I went through a learning process. So DCPs will get shipped in these boxes. I don't want to show the other side because my address is on it. But they'll get shipped in a box like this. And then when you open it up, you'll have your, let's see here. You'll have your sheet that shows the different, like metadata points or whatever for it. I don't know why I'm covering this up, but I'll read what this says here in a second, but the DCP file name, the size, what formats it in, scope or flat, I did 5.1 surround, the total runtime, when the credits start so they can put light cues on it, and then please ingest and do a QC run test as soon as possible. I had a backup Blu-ray in case it didn't work for some reason, but this is typically this is the hard drive for the DCP, right? So this is your typical hard drive. It plugs into like a server. So we got the fun little button here. Like I said, this is me just going all out extra for this movie. There's actually just a regular hard drive in here. So this is just the casing for it. Now, if you're like, I don't want to go this all out, like a standard like external hard drive that you can buy on Amazon is fine too. But since I worked at a movie theater and I knew what all this stuff was, I just kind of went all out here. So that's a little nerd moment. So if I ever want to do another theatrical release, I've already got all the tools for it. I'll keep cashing out, on that hard drive, or maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, so that's what a DCP looks like. And then they may require something like a clean version with no subtitles or text. So, this just gives them the option for international distribution to add in their own translated text files if needed. So like if you have somebody, speaking like a foreign language or something in your film and you're translating it to English, you would get rid of that and then they would just put that in themselves, right? Or you might have to provide that file depending on which distribution company you're working with. Then you have your audio deliverables. So stereo is going to be your most common. That's going to be audio coming out of your left and your right channel. I would just keep it to that. If you have the ability to do a 5.1 surround sound, that's fine. But honestly, like talking to Linda over at IndieRight, she's just like, just stereo is fine. Nobody really has the 5.1 surround sound in their house. It's very uncommon. They're just watching a movie and the sound's just coming out of the left and the right of the TV. So that's definitely fine. M&E tracks or music and effects tracks. This would be a separate file of the audio containing only the music or sound effects without dialogue. So this is for international dubbing. It just makes it easier. So if you have all the sound effects, like footsteps and, movement and stuff like that, like that's already there. And then, so a foreign actor can come in, do some dubbing, and then, just place that track right over the top without actually having to cut out, all of the other dialogue. Not a requirement. Some distributors may require it, but, if they're looking to really, if the foreign strategy is really important to them, but most, like Film Hub doesn't require it. Indie Rights will take it, but they don't require it. So it's really more so with the traditional distributors. And then the stems, optional separate tracks for dialogue, music, and effects in case the distributor needs to make audio adjustments. Again, not a requirement, but just makes their lives easier if they decide they want to change something in the QC process. Legal and contractual documents. You'll have your chain of title. This will prove that you have that you own the film or have control of the rights. That includes copyright registration, transfer agreements, and contracts. And again, this is not every distributor is going to require this, but you could run into this depending on who you're working with. Errors in omission or E&O insurance. Many distributors require E&O insurance to protect against potential legal claims, covers defamation, copyright infringement, or privacy issues. Talent and crew releases, signed agreements from the cast and crew giving you the legal right to use their performances. Music licensing agreements, proof that you have the legal rights to use music in your film. Includes sync licenses, master use licenses, and composer agreements. Subtitles, caption, and accessibility files. So closed captions, which pretty much every distribution company is going to require. Closed caption files. It's legally required. Didn't know that. Legally required for many streaming platforms. It includes both dialogue and non-dialogue sounds like door creaks or music playing or something like that. The more common method now is SDH, which is what Film Hub requires at this point now, although I don't really know the difference between these two. But subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, including speaker identifiers and sound effects. Speaker identifiers would typically be for a character off screen, which is typically included in the closed captions. So again, I don't really know the differences between these, but it's becoming more common now. Foreign language subtitles. So if you're distributing internationally, you may need multi-language subtitles. And then the different file formats would be .srt, which is the most common closed caption file format, or .vtt. I haven't used that VTT, but it is a file format. I would say pretty much any distributor is going to ask or require a .srt file. I've never seen anybody require a VTT file. It's always been a .srt file, which if you are getting closed captions made, like say rev.com, which is where, they're not sponsored, but that's the only place I've ever used to make closed captions. They'll ask you what format do you want this in. They'll give you a list of formats, and then .srt is usually at the top. And then of course, promotional and marketing materials. You got your trailer, a 1 minute to 2 minute trailer to promote your film, usually delivered in 1920 by 1080 or 4K. Also in H.264 or the ProRes format codecs. And if you need to learn more about codecs, I have a video about how to export your film for distribution somewhere on the channel, and I'll link it in the description if possible. But somewhere in the channel, I have videos explaining how to create all these deliverables. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's separate videos on how to create all of these. Poster artwork, high resolution poster art, 300 DPI for online and print use, including title treatments and properly formatted credits, although most platforms don't want you to have credits on your titles. Key art in multiple sizes, so you're going to have different sizes, such as 1920 by 1080 for thumbnails, or like the vertical ones for poster art. Stills and behind the scenes photos. Not a ton of these require, or not a lot of platforms or distributors require these, but it's nice to have just for behind the scenes, promotional material. Logline and synopsis. A logline is a 1 to 2 sentence summary of your film. So if you go to IMDb, you search a film, at the very top, there'll be a 1 to 2 sentence description of what the film is about. That's your log line. And then there will be a synopsis, which is a little bit longer afterwards for marketing purposes. And then a press kit or electronic press kit, EPK, which will have the synopsis, the log line, filmmaker bios, key credits, stills, etc. And that'll be used by the press and distributors to help promote your film. And then last, metadata and platform requirements. So film metadata, title, genre, runtime, cast, directors, etc. Brief and detailed descriptions for different platforms. All of them will have different ones. Like FilmHub, there's like a list of different metadata that they require. It's all easy to fill out, just basic information, but just know that you're going to have to, if you're working with a distributor, they're going to ask for this. Then platform specific requirements. Each platform has its own tech specs and deliverable requirements. An example, Apple TV and Amazon Prime require specific bit rates, audio codecs, and artwork dimensions. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Usually the distributor will just ask you for one master file, and then they will create the different ones for the different distributors. Like I've never had to make a different file for a specific platform, and I think it's becoming a lot more standardized in general. But just know if you're taking a self-distribution route, could be different requirements. So key takeaways, deliverables are essential assets required by distributors and platforms to market, sell, and stream your film. Having your deliverables ready in advance makes your film more attractive to distributors and speeds up the release process. The most common deliverables are the master film files, the master audio files, legal documents, marketing assets, and then captions and subtitles. And then a pro tip, organize your deliverables into clear label folder structures to help streamline submissions. A place like Indie Rights is going to tell you exactly how they want all of this organized, but FilmHub, for an example, they don't ask for this. So it's easier for you to kind of make like a master distribution folder and organize it properly. Using Indie Rights method of doing this is probably a good way just to standardize it. So I would just go to their website. They have a breakdown on how to do this. And then you can take, even if you don't go with Indie Rights, you can take that and use it elsewhere. Okay, so that wraps up section 4. Let's get into section 5, common distribution companies. So these are companies that you're likely going to run into when distributing your film. So the one that I talk about most on this channel, and that is, they're not paying me or anything like that, despite what some people have accused me of, which is super annoying. But FilmHub, they do pay me for the film that I distribute on there, but they don't pay me to say nice things about them. But FilmHub is a global distribution platform designed for independent filmmakers and content creators to distribute their films and TV shows to multiple streaming services worldwide. It provides self-distribution with a focus on access to large platforms like Amazon, Tubi, Roku, and international VOD services. So this is an aggregator. They don't call themselves an aggregator, but they're pretty much an aggregator at this point. But this is the service that I have used now for, I think it's going on 5 years at this point. Cashing Out's been on FilmHub, so this is the one I can speak to the best. So how FilmHub works, you will, as far as film submission, you upload your film to FilmHub's platform. Well, they'll review it and approve it. FilmHub requires content in certain formats like ProRes or H.264, and you'll need to provide them necessary metadata like the film, title, description, genre, poster art, etc. As far as distribution, FilmHub distributes to over 50 streaming platforms, including popular ones like Tubi, Pluto TV, Amazon Prime, and niche services for international distribution. And they manage all the technical delivery to platforms, ensuring compliance with the specifications required by each one. So this is a great method if you're looking for some self-distribution. They say it's not exclusive, but honestly, it's becoming a little bit more exclusive because they, at least with the free version, like if you can go distribute elsewhere if you want, but you have to pay them. So it's kind of like, if it's free, if you're using the free version, it's not very non-exclusive, which is fine. Like I don't really want to go anywhere else right now, but if you want to take your films elsewhere, you're going to have to pay a fee. As far as revenue collection, FilmHub collects revenue from the platforms and pays you an 80-20 revenue split depending on the platform and territory. Payments are made monthly with transparency on where the earnings come from, i.e. they will tell you which platform or region and how much. And there are no upfront fees with an asterisk. So FilmHub does not charge submission fees. You only pay a small percentage of the revenue they collect. You are not required to sign an exclusive contract, so you can still distribute your film elsewhere. And I put the asterisk there because, like I said, the only way you can do this is to pay for one of their subscription services, which kind of sucks. You used to be able to just do whatever you wanted, but now they are looking to obviously make more money. So if you want to take your film elsewhere, they want to, recoup that money somehow. The pros of FilmHub: wide range of platforms, so they pretty much distribute everywhere, both domestically and international, which is nice. There is no upfront fees, asterisks, only a revenue share. So there is a free version, which is what I use. And, I've never paid them for anything else. So that's been nice. Transparency for the most part on revenue and platform earnings. Now they're getting a lot more transparent, but again, you have to pay for those tools, which is super annoying. I wish they had some sort of free version of that. Like maybe, the paid version gets you better stats, but it just would be nice to have some stats, but it is what it is. And then flexible distribution without exclusivity. The cons are you need to handle your own marketing promotion to ensure your film gets noticed by the platform, so they don't do any marketing for you. And the revenue share is typically lower than platforms that offer exclusive distribution deals, so something to keep in mind. Next, we have Quiver. I haven't used Quiver, so this is now where we're getting, so I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm going to be talking about things that I don't have experience with. So this is just through some basic research. So if you worked with Quiver, I would love to talk to you. So reach out to me if you have worked with them. Otherwise, I'm just going to be talking out of my ass right now, I guess. And that's how it's going to be, honestly, for the rest of these platforms, since I've only worked with FilmHub at this point. But with Quiver is a film distribution aggregator that helps filmmakers distribute the films across digital platforms like Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, Vudu, etc. Quiver acts as the bridge between filmmakers and VOD platforms, offering a more DIY approach for filmmakers who want full control. How it works: with submitting your film, you upload your film and provided relevant metadata. Quiver accepts standard digital formats like ProRes, H.264, etc. They will review your submission before it's approved for distribution. As far as platform delivery, Quiver delivers your films to various platforms, including Amazon, Google Play, and Tubi. You can choose which platforms you want to distribute to based on your film's genre and target audience, which is nice. Revenue collection: Quiver collects royalties directly from the platforms and pays you 100% of the revenue minus their cut, which I guess is about 30%. Now here's the kicker, what makes them different from FilmHub. Quiver charges a flat fee submission per platform rather than taking a percentage of the earnings. So this is where I'm getting a little confused. So do they take revenue as well to afterwards? I don't know, but all I know is they charge a flat fee per platform, and they don't have an exclusive contract, so you can distribute elsewhere without any restrictions, which is nice. Again, I haven't worked with them, but it's a good option if you have the money up front to distribute to the different platforms. And I don't know what just like the costs look like. So again, if you worked with Quiver, I would love to talk to you about that to learn more about it. Pros: flat fee per platform rather than a revenue share, allowing for more transparency in earnings. You retain the full rights to your film and easy distribution to multiple platforms. Cons: they don't handle marketing, so you'll need to drive traffic to your film. Extra fees for optional service like metadata optimization or marketing support. I don't know enough about those to really comment on them, but apparently that's a thing. Bitmax, which is a premium digital media services company that focuses on managing the distribution of films, TV shows, and other media to major platforms like iTunes or Apple at this point, Amazon, Google Play, and others. Bitmax is known for providing more high-touch professional services tailored to filmmakers, studios, and content owners looking for high-end technical distribution support. How it works is you submit your film in a digital format, usually ProRes or some other broadcast standard files. Bitmax handles the processing of your film and prepares it for distribution. You'll need to provide detailed metadata, including the title, description, credits, and artwork. How they deliver to platforms is they distribute your films to a wide range of platforms like Apple TV, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, and other major services. They also provide content protection services like DRM, digital rights management, and ensure compliance with the technical requirements for each platform. How it collects revenue is Bitmax facilitates royalty collection from the platforms and distributes revenue to you. They usually charge a percentage of your earnings as part of their service fees. This varies depending on the platforms you distribute to. And then they offer some premium services such as closed captioning, subtitling, content localization, and high-end digital mastering to ensure your film is properly optimized for each platform. And they also offer analytics and reporting to help you track your film's performance. Pros: high-end quality service ideal for larger budgets and more technical projects, offering services like subtitling, closed captioning, and localization, and access to premium platforms like Netflix and Hulu. Cons: more expensive than services like FilmHub or Quiver due to the premium nature of the service, more complex process, suited for filmmakers with bigger budgets or professional studios, typically requires long-term contracts and more formal agreements. And one comment I want to make about Bitmax and Quiver, I don't know if they guarantee if you pay these fees, if you're going to get on these platforms. Like if I pay, say like the fee to get on Netflix is like, this is probably super low, but say it's like $1,000 to get on Netflix. Am I guaranteed to get on Netflix if I pay that $1,000? I have absolutely no idea. So that's something to keep in mind too. Again, if you've worked with Bitmax or Quiver, let me know. I would love to interview you and we could talk more about it because I just want to know more about them in general. Next, indie rights. Indie rights is interesting because it's kind of a hybrid of the traditional distributor and the aggregator. But indie rights is an independent film distribution company that focuses on helping filmmakers get their film movies onto popular streaming platforms and VOD services. They are known for flexibility and transparency, and they provide filmmakers with a more hands-on approach to distribution and marketing, making it a great option for independent creators looking to retain control over the content while reaching a wider audience, which is nice. How it works with them: you submit your film in a digital format like ProRes. They prefer, I think they only take ProRes, so MP4 isn't correct, but they will process the film and ensure it's formatted for the various platforms. You'll need to provide basic metadata like title, description, artwork, as well as technical details for delivery. As far as platform delivery, they distribute your film to a wide array of platforms, including Amazon, Apple, Google Play, others, focusing on major and niche outlets. And I will say they do have direct relationships with a lot of platforms, so they do guarantee that you'll get on certain platforms. They do guarantee you'll get on Amazon, YouTube, Google, Tubi, etc. So that's nice that there is some guarantee if they accept your film. They handle technical requirements such as file encoding, metadata delivery, and platform-specific compliance. As far as revenue collection, Indie Rights collects royalties from the platforms and distributes the payments to filmmakers, typically on a quarterly basis. They do a revenue split. I want to say it's 80-20, but it might be 70-30. Don't remember exactly 100%. I probably should have wrote that down. But it's on their website, so they tell you exactly upfront what they charge, so there's no secrets there. As far as premium services, they're very cost effective. Like, they don't have expenses or anything like that. You're pretty much going to have everything ready for your film yourself. They might make recommendations on different services you can use. So I don't think that they do closed captioning or anything like that, but they do offer support with digital marketing. Like, they'll give you a rundown of how you can market your film. They don't do the marketing themselves, as far as they do B2B marketing, which is business to business marketing, but they don't do B2C marketing, which is business to consumer. So they don't get they don't market directly to the consumer, but they do offer support and how to market to the consumer. So that is nice. They also offer detailed sales tracking and analytics, helping filmmakers understand their revenue streams and make more informed decisions, which is nice. As far as the pros go, obviously the biggest one is transparent revenue sharing model, which is really nice. Flexible and independent, giving creators a lot more control over their content. They only have a 3-year deal, which is nice, 3-year distribution deal. So that's why I say these 10 to 15 year deals are ridiculous when they're doing something like 3-year deals. But yeah, their deal is 3 years. And if you're not happy, you can go elsewhere afterwards. And then a wide range of platforms for distribution, including, large scale and niche services. Cons: no white glove service like some premium distributors, so filmmakers may need to handle a lot of the tasks. I mean, honestly, you're handling all of the tasks yourselves. They have a smaller team and they don't really have any premium services compared to large distributors. And then less direct access to platforms like Netflix or Hulu, which typically are more formal distribution, require a more formal distribution process. So this is great for smaller filmmakers. Basically, if you're doing like an Avengers size movie, which you're probably not watching my channel if you're doing a movie that big, but if you're doing a Hollywood like movie, any rights may not be the best option, but you never know, it could be. And then of course you have your independent film distributor. The average independent film distributor specializes in getting films produced with mid-range budgets around $100,000 onto various streaming platforms, TV and VOD services. These platforms typically focus on independent filmmakers who need access to distribution channels without the complexity of working with larger, more established companies. The goal is to maximize exposure while ensuring filmmakers retain as much creative and financial control as possible. So how it works with an independent film distributor is, as far as the film submission process, they'll require the finished film in a suitable delivery format like ProRes, like I've been talking about. They require the same metadata. As far as platform delivery, they will get you on a lot of the similar platforms. You'll notice a lot of the same distribution methods for smaller films are pretty much all the same as far as what platforms you can get on. And of course, they will make sure your film meets the technical specifications for each platform and handle all the encoding and all of that. As far as revenue collection, obviously they will collect the revenue on your behalf, and they usually pay on a quarterly or biannual basis. Distribution fees will typically take a percentage of the revenue, usually between 20 to 40%, depending on the distribution's contract. This is often less than larger premium distributors, but higher than DIY platforms like FilmHub. And just know that, even with that revenue split, that's after they take whatever fees. The marketing fees are usually the most common. Premium services, while not as extensive as high-end services like Bitmax, distributors in this range may offer additional support services such as closed captioning, subtitling, or marketing. Some may offer limited promotion packages to access to film festivals, helping filmmakers get noticed in specific genres or markets. Pros: more accessible for filmmakers with mid-range budgets, offering a balanced combination of services and revenue sharing. Good exposure on a range of well-known VOD platforms, flexible contract terms, and easier entry compared to larger distributors. I'm going to put an asterisk here, potentially transparent and semi-transparent revenue sharing, with many distributors offering direct access to platform or performance metrics. Cons: limited access to major platforms like Netflix, Hulu, and traditional TV, which offer high-end profile distribution deals with stricter requirements. Lower level of hands-on support or marketing compared to higher-end services, so filmmakers may need to do a significant amount of their own promotion, and revenue sharing percentages can still be relatively high, especially for mid-range distributors, reducing the filmmakers' overall take. Okay, so afterwards, you heard me talking about all this, and you're probably asking yourself what option to choose. So let me briefly give you a summary again of each option and who it's probably best suited for. So FilmHub is a self-service platform that allows independent filmmakers to distribute their films on major VOD platforms without upfront fees, taking a percentage of revenue. Best suited for DIY filmmakers looking for affordable, no-frills distribution. Quiver, a digital distribution service that helps filmmakers deliver their films to platforms like Apple, Amazon, and Google Play, with additional services like revenue collection and marketing. Best suited for filmmakers seeking a balance between ease of use and professional support. Bitmax, a premium distribution service providing high-touch professional support for filmmakers looking to distribute their films on 2 major platforms, with additional services like subtitling and content protection. Best suited for filmmakers with larger budgets and more complex distribution needs. Indie Rights, a flexible and transparent distribution company that focuses on independent filmmakers, providing access to a wide range of platforms best suited for independent filmmakers who want control over their content in a transparent, affordable distribution process, or the average independent distribution, or the average independent distributor, a mid-tier distribution service for independent films with budgets around or under $100,000, offering access to various VOD platforms, typically taking a percentage of earnings with basic marketing and technical support, best suited for filmmakers with mid-range budgets seeking straightforward and cost-effective distribution. So I'm also going to talk about DIY / self-distribution here in a second, but just based on these options, I'll kind of give you my thoughts here. I think at this point, unless you want to be completely hands-off, if you want to be completely hands-off, going with a film distributor is going to be your best option, right? They're going to take care of everything for you. So if you're like, I don't know anything you're talking about, I don't understand anything, I don't know what a deliverable is, I don't know what format my movie was shot on, like you can just hand this off to a distributor and they'll take care of it. If you're looking to be a little bit more hands-on, I would personally start with indie rights at this point. I really like what they had to say after my interview with their CEO. So I think this is a great stepping stone because it's kind of it's a great deal overall and it's very short. So if you don't like what's happening there, then you can just, after 3 years, just take your film elsewhere, which I think is fine. And then afterwards, between FilmHub, Quiver, and Bitmax, I'm using FilmHub. So that's the only one I can speak on. I've been happy with them so far. But, Quiver and Bitmax seem to be a nice alternative. Now, why would you need to choose between any of these if you want to go with the DIY route? And why didn't I include the DIY route in this? It's primarily because the only way to get on any platform that's not like YouTube, your own YouTube channel, or Vimeo on demand or anything like that, the only way to get on, Tubi or something like that is with one of these methods. Now, it's not uncommon, or it's not completely out of the realm of possibility for you to form a direct relationship with the distributor. Some filmmakers have accomplished this, but most likely somebody like you or I are never going to be able to do that. So if you want to get as far as streaming goes, if you want to get your film on a major platform, you're going to have to use one of these methods. So like I said, if you want to be completely hands-off, you can use a typical independent distributor, or you can use indie rights. Indie rights is a little more hands-on in that you got to create the deliverables, but after you create the deliverables, it's pretty much hands-off from there. Or if you want to be a little bit more hands-on, FilmHub, Quiver, and Bitmax, all fine options. Again, I can only speak on FilmHub. I haven't had any experience with the other two, but it sounds like those are great options as well. Now, section 6, let's talk about DIY and self-distribution, which is definitely near and dear to my heart since that is pretty much the theme of my entire YouTube channel, right? With DIY and self-distribution, you can sell through a place like Vimeo on Demand. You can launch your own website with digital downloads, and you can create special edition bundles with bonus content, right? And then I didn't write this on here too, but you could also, upload to your own channel, or you can also four-wall as well and get your movie in a theater, right? You can do that all yourself. You don't need a distributor for that. So first, Vimeo on Demand overview. Vimeo on Demand is a professional video on demand platform where filmmakers can upload, price, and sell their films directly to their audience. It's a great option for those who want a polished video-centric distribution method. Key features, customizable player, so you can embed Vimeo's player on your website or landing page for a branded experience. Flexible pricing, you can do pay-per-views, you can do a subscription service, you can do a rental, or they can buy your film outright, which is really nice. Global reach, so they support multiple currencies and deliver your films to various different regions. You can really distribute worldwide with this method. No upfront fees, which there's a little bit of an asterisk to there. There's no upfront fees aside from how much content you're uploading. So they give you an hour for free. Anything beyond that, you have to buy a certain amount of hours. It's still pretty reasonable. I think you can buy 10 hours or something like that for $100. So it's not, outrageously priced or anything like that. But they just take a 10% commission on each sale. So if, for an example, you sell your movie for $10, they're going to take $1 of that. That's pretty much it. And I think that includes the payment processing fee too. So don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that dollar that comes out also includes the payment processing fee. And as far as analytics on your film, they do offer insights on how your film is performing, which can help you refine your marketing. The pros of this, it's professional, high quality streaming, which is nice. It's easy to use with flexible pricing options, and it's a clean branded experience for your audience. The cons, obviously they take a percentage of each sale, which is not, I don't even know if I call that a con, but it's a con. And then limited marketing tools to drive traffic. So you have to do all the marketing for this, which you're going to have to drive all the traffic. So if you just write one Facebook post, it's like, please buy my film on my website. And you got 5 of your friends who like the post, and you're like, why is nobody buying my film? That's not enough. You're going to have to do a lot of marketing to drive traffic to your website. But this is best for filmmakers who want a simple, professional platform to sell their films directly to their audience with minimal setup. Now you can do self-distribution via website or e-commerce platform. Vimeo On Demand, you're pretty much getting your own website, but if you wanted to create your own website, you could absolutely do that. And then you could sell through a place like Gumroad or Sellfy, but I don't know anything about those. But it gives you full control over your branding and sales process, right? So key features here, customizable branding, which is nice. You can sell digital and physical products. So like myself, I sold digital and DVD copies and Blu-ray copies of my own film. You could do your own subscription service if you want to. You have to use your own payment processing. So you could use something like PayPal or Stripe. So pretty much the only fees you're paying are the payment processing fees, which are pretty small. And then marketing tools like a Wix can offer some marketing services such as collecting email addresses or something like that. But honestly, you're going to be doing a lot on your own. The pros, full control over pricing, sales, and customer experience, which is nice. No commission from a third party except for payment processing fees, and ability to sell both digital and physical products if you want. And you can sell merch too if you want to, which is nice. Cons may require some setup and management of your own store, and there may be some fees with the store as well. And then you may need additional tools or services for streaming video securely. So make sure you keep that in mind. This is best for filmmakers who want complete control over their brand and sales process and are willing to manage their own website and online store, which is something I did personally. So, you could do this and you could do this. I do both. So all these methods is nice because you don't just have to do one. You can do all of these if you want. You can use platforms like YouTube or Patreon. So, you can offer free short films or charge for full-length features. You can use YouTube's channel memberships or Patreon. The pros, you keep full control over pricing and distribution. You don't keep 100% of your revenue. You do, but there's payment processing fees like from Patreon. There's payment processing fees from YouTube. They'll take 30% if you're looking to do this on memberships. The cons are obviously it requires very strong marketing skills. You're going to have to do all the marketing to drive traffic to your film. No built-in audience. You have to do all the work. There's also no monetization if you are not monetized on YouTube before you release your film. So make sure you keep that in mind. And of course, four-walling or renting theaters to screen your film. I think that's pretty self-explanatory to what it is. You rent a theater and sell your tickets. The theater takes the rental fee and you keep 100% of your ticket sales, which is nice. There may be some payment processing fees if you do your tickets online. So let's say you do something like with Eventbrite. Eventbrite might have some ticketing fees, but aside from that, you'll pretty much keep all the revenue unless you just go to the theater and sling tickets with cash, right? Then you keep all the revenue. So the pros, keep all the box office revenues, great for niche audiences like horror, faith-based, or documentary. Cons require strong marketing. Obviously, people won't show up if you don't promote. And then the upfront cost to rent the theater or working with a company for a revenue split. So that wraps up self-distribution. Now let's get into how do you actually attract a distributor if you want to not go the self-distribution route and you actually want to work with a distributor. So the obvious way, at least the old school way of doing this, I don't know how much it works anymore, but film festivals, you submit to a film festival, and I wrote down all the big ones here because that's pretty much the only way to get distribution is through something like a Sundance or a South by Southwest, Tribeca, TIFF, etc. Good luck getting into those unless you're a major filmmaker, but never say never. I guess somebody at our budget level is probably not going to get into Sundance. Screening, if accepted, your film is showcased to a curated audience, including distributors, critics, and industry professionals, distribution opportunities. Distributors attending the festivals might approach you with offers. You can pitch directly to distributors or sales agents during the event. So that would be a reason to go to these festivals. You can, if you know a specific distributor or sales agents going to be there, you can pitch directly to them. And then obviously winning awards or generating buzz can attract a lot of attention. The key benefits, obviously credibility and recognition. You have a lot of networking opportunities like I meant, and then potential for deals for these different distribution methods. The biggest tip for success as I have here is you need to target the right festivals. Obviously, again, if you're making something at my budget level, you're probably not getting into any of these festivals. So you're going to have to target much smaller festivals. And a lot of time distributors are not going to these festivals, but you never know. Have your press materials ready, create a press kit, have trailers, posters, and all that ready to go, and then engage with attendees. Talk to industry professionals, attend networking events, and build connections. Now, another common method, and I don't know how, a lot of distributors go to these methods, but we have the film markets, which is where a lot of these distribution deals are made. So film markets are industry-only events where filmmakers, distributors, sales agents, and buyers negotiate deals. Unlike film festivals, film markets are strictly business focused. There are no public screenings, only private screenings and business meetings. So you have the big ones like AFM, American Film Market. You have the European Film Market, Berlin, Germany. You have Cannes, and then you have something like Toronto or TIFF in Canada. How it works, they have sales booths or pitches. Filmmakers or the representatives showcase their films through booths or private screenings. And actually, this is something Indie Rights does, and a lot of other distributors do too. But Indie Rights will go to these film markets and pitch your film to these different distributors or whatever platforms. They'll meet with buyers. You can pitch your film to distributors, buyers, and sales agents in one-on-one meetings. Distribution deals. If distributors see potentials, they may offer licensing or distribution agreements. Deals can include domestic or international rights, like we've talked about before. And then pre-sales, which I don't know how relevant pre-sales are now these days, but it was at some point. Pre-sales, in some market, you can negotiate pre-sale deals, selling distribution rights before the film is finished to fund the remainder of production or cover distribution costs. This was very big with independent films 10 or so years ago. I don't know how much this is being done now. I don't see it talked about a lot as far as at our level, but I know it is something that happens. The key benefits here, obviously, are direct access to buyers. It allows you to, connect directly with sales agents, distributors, and streamers. Potential for international deals, so you have a lot better chance of landing international deals through a film market. And then sales agent representation. Even if you attend the market yourself, many filmmakers will hire a sales agent to represent them. So you don't always have to do this yourself. You could hire a sales agent and have them do all the work for you. Tips for success, obviously getting a sales agent is obviously a great thing. Make sure it's the right sales agent, which we'll talk about here momentarily. Having the right marketing materials obviously helps, and trying to book meetings in advance if possible. This will be harder to do if you don't have social proof. Like if you're a first-time filmmaker, this is going to be very difficult. But if you have a bunch of films in your docket already, this is obviously going to be a lot easier for you to do because you have that social proof. And then obviously sales agents, your distribution representative. A sales agent acts as the middleman between you and potential distributors. They specialize in selling the rights to your films to platform streamers or international buyers, handling the negotiation process on your behalf. How it works, you hire a sales agent. You can find a sales agent at film festivals, film markets, or through referrals. Representation, sales agents pitch your films to distributors, negotiate deals, and help you secure distribution rights. Revenue split, they'll typically take a 10 to 25% commission on deals they negotiate. You'll still need to pay the platforms or distributors cut on top of that. So, if your cut of something is like $100,000 just for easy numbers, and their commission is 10%, then they're going to take 10% of that $100,000 or $10,000, right? Territory sales. Sales agents often sell the rights on a territory by territory basis, which is nice, helping you maximize your distribution revenue. Obviously, the key benefits of using a sales agent is their connections, their negotiation expertise, and it's just time saving for you because you don't have to figure out all this stuff yourself, which is nice. As far as tips for success when choosing a sales agent. Choose a sales agent with a proven track record. And actually, I have an interview coming up here. Actually, the interview will be out already when this video comes out. But look at it's like a 3-hour interview with these filmmakers, Brady Nelson and Neil Fortre. They hired a sales agent, and that worked out pretty well for them. So they do have experience with that. So I have talked to somebody who's done that. Clear contracts, make sure the contract for them, as far as their commission rates, is very clear and it outlines their responsibilities. And, make sure if festival representation, and they're going to film festivals and representing you in all these markets to help increase your film's visibility. And then, of course, you can just cold call distributors, right? You can just skip all this other stuff and just contact the distributors directly, which isn't completely uncommon, right? You can email them, like, for example, Indie Rights, you can just contact them directly. They have a Google form that you fill out, and then if they're interested, they'll contact you. With other distributors, they probably have a similar process, or you can email them. But, this is great for niche and genre films, especially if it fits their catalog. So here's some brief steps on what you can do to kind of cold call them, research and target the right distributors. So, if you're making a horror film, you probably shouldn't be contacting faith-based distributors. You know what I mean? So make sure you're targeting the right distributors. You can use services like IMDb Pro, Film Freeway, or LinkedIn to find contact information. You can look for indie-friendly distributors like Gravitas Ventures, or I'm sorry, I actually don't know how to pronounce that, but I've heard kind of mixed things about Gravitas, so just keep that in mind. Indie Rights is obviously very friendly, or Shout Studios. I don't know enough about them, but they're there. Prepare a professional pitch. Write a concise and compelling email that includes a brief synopsis of your film, if it won any awards, a link to your trailer and screener, and mention the film's target audience and marketing potential. One thing I've noticed as far as like working in content, so not necessarily with films, but like I'm a full-time YouTuber as well, not with this channel, but I work for another channel and I have all the emails. One common thing that I have found, and why I understand why a lot of emails people send out probably don't get responded to, is that they're usually a mess. So make sure you keep it very lean, very concise, very easy to read. If you're just sending like a brick of text, kind of like what I got here, that's going to turn people off from reading it. If I see a brick of text, if somebody emails our company a brick of text, I'm probably not reading it. I'm just going to be honest with you. I keep my emails very short when I'm talking with people. I get straight to the point. I'm not fluffing it up because people don't have time. If you're reading 100 emails a day, you don't have time to read bricks and bricks of text. You have time to read a few sentences. So make sure you're keeping it very, very brief. And then if they don't reach back out to you, you can follow up respectfully. If you don't get a response, you can send up a follow-up email every 1 to 2 weeks. Just don't be spammy or pushy. If they're interested, they'll get back to you. Just got to be a little patient. I'm forgetting the word that I'm thinking of. But be proactive, but don't be annoying. The pros of this, direct contact, you obviously bypass gatekeepers and pitch directly to decision makers. You don't need festivals. You have a lot more potential for smaller deals. The cons are it's a very low response rate. You don't have a lot of leverage. And then there's a lot more potential for predatory offers. So just make sure you keep that in mind. So definitely do your homework. Persistence. That's the word I was looking for. Be persistent, but polite, so you don't come off as spammy if you're reaching out to a lot of different people. Make sure you curate your emails to the different distributors too. Don't just copy and paste something you wrote on ChatGPT to a bunch of distributors. One thing, like when I'm looking for people to work for us, I notice a lot of people who just ChatGPT a bunch of nonsense. And sometimes they don't even change what ChatGPT wrote. They'll just copy and paste exactly what ChatGPT wrote. And ChatGPT will be like, insert project type. And then they'll put that in the freaking email. Be diligent. Don't be stupid. Now, packaging your film for distribution is obviously very important, regardless if you're pitching to a distributor, attending a market, or working with a sales agent. Doing this properly is obviously very important. So essential materials you need: a screener, a high quality screener of your film, ideally a DCP or high-res digital format. Usually a YouTube link will be fine. You can do Vimeo, do something password protective if you want to. A trailer, obviously you want to make a really, really great trailer. A press kit and a marketing plan definitely don't hurt either. And here's a couple of tips for maximizing your distribution opportunities. So start with festivals. Use festivals to generate buzz and credibility, even if you're just doing this yourself. Leverage market attendance. If you decide to attend one of these film markets, have your film properly packaged and book meetings in advance if possible. Work with a sales agent, especially if you're a first-time filmmaker. Hiring a reputable sales agent increases your chances of securing good distribution deals. And be persistent and patient. Distribution deals often take time and multiple attempts. Don't rush into unfavorable agreements. You're dating, essentially. Don't marry the first person you go on a date with unless they're really good. So to give you a quick summary, here are the best paths for indie distribution. Film festivals, great for generating buzz and attracting distributors. Best for filmmakers looking to build credibility and industry exposure. Film markets, direct access to distributors and buyers. Best for filmmakers ready to negotiate sales and licensing deals. Hiring a sales agent to handle distribution negotiations and have industry connections is great. Best for filmmakers who want expert representation and broader reach. And of course, packaging is key. Always have a trailer, screener, and press kit ready to go. A strong marketing package makes your film more attractive to buyers. So by strategically combining film festivals, film markets, sales agent, representation, indie filmmakers can maximize their chances of securing distribution deals and reaching a global audience. Like I said, this video is a handful, but we finally got through all the basics. So now let's get into some brief but important tips. We're almost here to the end. Only got three more things left, and they're a lot shorter than everything that I just went through. So I appreciate if you made it this far. Definitely leave me a comment letting me know you went this far. Comment, I don't know. Just leave me a comment if you've made it this far in the video. So now let's get into some important tips as far as maximizing distribution as a whole. So film marketing and promotion are obviously important. Even with distribution, you will still need to promote your film, even if they're offering marketing services. So whether that's through social media, press releases, or audience building, you're probably always going to want to do some sort of promotion yourself. The distributor's role: some distributors handle the marketing, others may leave you with it. Make sure you clarify the level of marketing support that they'll provide. Building your audience, building a fan base on platforms like Patreon or Instagram can help attract distributors and generate self-distribution revenue. So marketing is the number one most important thing you can do just with the film in general after or when you start distributing. So ways you can build an audience before the release: you can do social media, behind the scenes content, trailers, cast Q&As, etc. You can build email lists, which is actually something I'm experimenting with right now. So you can have direct access to your fans. Crowdfunding helps fund the film and builds hype. So I want to make more videos about crowdfunding in the future. I think this is easier to do after you have a couple of films or social proof in your belt. It's very hard to do on your first film. But, some filmmakers do have luck with it. Like, you have exceptions like the YouTuber Chris Stuckman, who funded his entire film through crowdfunding, but he did have social proof with his YouTube channel, right? So crowdfunding is a lot easier when you have a built-in audience already. Niche audiences matter. Horror films, obviously, target horror fans. Make sure you're getting on all the important platforms like Tubi. Make sure you're doing Blu-ray releases, theatrical releases, having the right kind of merch. Obviously, all those things help. With faith-based films, marketing to church groups seems to work pretty well with that. Social justice documentaries you can promote through activist communities. So those are just three, but if you have a genre outside of that, like an action film or something like that, just do your research, pretty much. Your film release strategy obviously matters. Theatrical versus digital. Some filmmakers opt for a theatrical release before going digital, while others prefer to skip theaters in favor of streaming or video on demand. Windowing your strategy, discussing how the film might have different release windows. Example, first in theaters, then video on demand, which you can even break down the video on demand into, we're going to start with transactional video on demand so people can buy and rent it first, and then we'll do some streaming, and then after that we'll do some AVOD, and then you could do broadcast as well, and how windowing can affect both revenue and audience access. I would like to do a further video on this, so I think what I'll have to do is break down my strategy for cashing out and kind of how each window worked for me long term. So I think that's something I'll definitely do, or just talk to filmmakers about in general. Contract negotiation basics, what to watch for in a contract, rights granted, territories, platforms, and formats, obviously, revenue splits, including advances or minimum guarantees, exclusivity clauses, is it going to be exclusive rights or non-exclusive, and a payment schedule. When are we getting paid? Are we getting paid monthly, quarterly, biannually? Make sure that's in your contract. Legal assistance. You may want a lawyer for contract review, especially if you're dealing with complex rights or long-term deals. And actually did an interview with my lawyer for cashing out, and she mentioned a lot of free resources as well. So those are available if you can't pay a lawyer outright. Post-distribution, royalties and accounting. How do you ensure you're getting your fair share? Look at the royalty reports and payment schedules. So make sure your distributor is giving these to you. Distribution recoupment, clarify how distributors recoup their marketing and distribution costs before paying out your share. And then tracking success. Consider platforms or services to help track your film's performances across different platforms, views, sales, etc. And then crowdfunding for distribution. You may need to do some crowdfunding on Kickstarter or Indiegogo to help fund a self-distribution campaign or help generate initial interest in a film before distribution. Again, I think this is easier to do after you have a couple films in your belt, but it's definitely an option. All right, so that wraps up section 8. Now let's get into section 9. How do we avoid predatory distributors? So now we're going to talk about some things that predatory distributors will do, what you should do to avoid them, and just all that funness. So 1, red flags of predatory distributors: excessive or undefined recoupable expenses. So something that I've talked about quite a bit. What that means: in most distribution deals, the distributor deducts their expenses, such as marketing and delivery, before sharing profits with you. Predatory distributors often include vague, undefined, or inflated expenses to ensure they never have to pay you or back-end royalties. So I use the example of the steak dinner. They're charging outrageous expenses. There could just be no limit. So you want to make sure you're keeping an eye out for that. So red flags would be no expense cap. The contract doesn't limit on how much the distributor can deduct. I feel like it's more common that there is a cap, but just make sure that there's no indefinite cap on what expenses that they can charge you. And they're not charging you up front, but you just may never see your revenue, right? Broad language, like phrases like all marketing and administrative costs without specifics, allow for unlimited deductions. Ongoing expenses, some distributors add perpetual fees, consistently reducing your profits. All things to keep in mind. What to do: demand itemized expense breakdowns in the contract, add a cap on recoupable expenses, i.e. no more than 20 to 30% of your gross revenue. Ensure you have the right to audit their expenses. That's the big one. So if they're charging you a bunch of stuff, they need to show what they're charging you for. You need to be able to ask for a breakdown. It's kind of insane. Like if my boss asks me, what does this video cost? How much have we spent? And I just say, I don't know. It just costs what it costs. Like we charge this and that, it's like, don't worry about it. No, like it shouldn't, my boss wouldn't find that acceptable for me. You shouldn't find it acceptable for a partner that you're working with. Next, long-term one-sided contracts. What this means: some predatory distributors lock you into lengthy contracts, such as 10 to 25 years, or even in perpetuity, preventing you from seeking better deals later. You lose control of your film for years, even if the distributor is doing little to promote it. So, they may do a lot in like the first couple months, but they may not just, market your film at year 10. Are they marketing your film at year 10? Probably not. They're probably doing the least minimal effort. They may go to like AFM, charge you that steak dinner, and then charge you later, right? But they're not doing any real sort of marketing beyond, what they in the first initial couple months or years. Red flags to look out for: contracts lasting more than 5 years, automatic renewal clauses without your approval, no reversion clause, meaning you can't get your rights back if the distributor fails to meet expectations. What you can do, you can negotiate for a shorter term contract. You can include a reversion clause, meaning if the distributor doesn't meet performance benchmarks, such as revenue targets or sales volume, the rights revert back to you. And then avoid contracts with automatic renewals unless parties both explicitly agree. So actually, indie rights mentioned that they do have automatic renewals, so you'll kind of have to pay attention to that. But they're at least upfront about that. But you do have the ability to stop your contract if you want. Film Hub is also in perpetuity as far as their rights, but you're supposedly able, and this is according to the CEO, that you're able to take down your film whenever you want. So they have your film in perpetuity as long as you're on the platform, right? But this is more for other distributors, more so than those two specifically, because they're at least transparent about that. Just make sure you're watching out for that with traditional distributors. Lack of transparency or vague reporting, what that means: predatory distributors often provide minimal or unclear reporting, making it difficult to track your film's earnings. This allows them to underreport profits or hide expenses, keeping more money for themselves. Some red flags here would be infrequent or irregular financial reports, no clear timeline for royalty payments, lack of audit rights preventing you from verifying the distributor's accounting. What you can do about this: demand detailed regular reports, such as quarterly, that specify gross revenue, expenses they charge, the net profits, and then your share of the net profits. So gross would be before expenses, net would be after expenses. Insist on audit rights in the contract to verify their accounting, and if they refuse audit clauses, run. Next, high or hidden distribution fees. What this means: many predatory distributors charge exorbitant upfront fees for services like marketing, delivery, but often do very little to promote the film. In some cases, they take large upfront payments and then disappear. Red flags: upfront fees over $5,000 to $10,000 without clear justification. Hidden marketing fees that are deducted from revenue without your consent. Vague service fees with no explanation of what they cover. What you can do about this is avoid large upfront fees. Legitimate distributors make money by taking a cut of the film's profits, not by charging huge upfront fees. If the distributor insists on upfront costs, ask for specific details on how money can be spent. Include a clause preventing hidden fees overall. Next, lack of marketing or promotional effort. What this means: some distributors sign films but make no effort to market or promote them. They may warehouse your film, acquiring it but not objectively trying to sell it simply to expand their library. A lot of distributors will sell like a package of films altogether to a platform. They don't really care about your film too much, so they'll say, we're going to market your film, but they'll write one tweet about it or whatever, and then just group your film with a bunch of other films, or just lock it in a basement. So they just say, hey, we have all these films. Red flags: vague or missing marketing plan in the contract, no guarantee on a minimum marketing spend, lack of sales milestones or performance benchmarks. And what you can do: include minimum marketing commitment clause. Example: the distributor must spend at least $5,000 to $10,000 on promotion. Add performance benchmarks. If the distributor doesn't achieve specific sales targets, the rights refer back to you, like we kind of talked about earlier. Make sure the contract specifies their marketing responsibilities. Next, overly favorable revenue splits. What this means: some predatory distributors promise large revenue shares, such as 80-20, 90-10 in your favor to lure you in. However, they inflate expenses or hidden fees to ensure you never see profits. So make sure you're really paying attention to contract details. Red flags: unrealistically high revenue shares, contracts that lack expense transparency, making it easy for them to offset profits with inflated costs. What you can do: don't be lured in by overly generous splits. They're often a scam tactic. Ensure the contract has expense transparency clauses and caps on expenses. And one other thing I want to mention too that is not often talked about a lot, but make sure that you do some research on the company too. Like if they have a high likelihood of bankruptcy for one reason or another, like they're just spending way too much money, they're living lavishly. I don't know how you do this, but if you can figure out how to do some, research on the company's earnings or anything on what they're spending, their debt or whatever. If your film if they go bankrupt, you want to make sure there's a clause in your contract too, that if they go bankrupt, the rights are reverted back to you, because there's some companies like, I won't name names, but there's some distribution platforms that people have worked with and their films were locked up in these bankruptcy lawsuits. And then the films just can't get their rights back. They can't take it elsewhere. And a lot of these predatory distributors too, they'll start one company, purposely have the company go bankrupt, and then they'll have another company that they own buy the rights to those films for pennies on the dollars and do whatever they want with them afterwards. And then you just never see your film again. So make sure you're paying. I don't know how you pay attention to that, but maybe through referrals and Facebook groups and seeing what people have to say about them. But just know that's a real possibility as well. So how do we protect ourselves? One, you can get legal review. Always have an entertainment attorney review your distribution contract. They can catch predatory clauses and ensure you get a fair deal. You can do some research on the distributor, such as Googling the company name with terms like scam or lawsuit to see if they have a bad reputation. Use resources like IMDb Pro, Film Freeway, and other industry forums to research distributor reviews. Reach out to other filmmakers who have worked with the distributor and ask about their experience. That's probably the most simple thing you can do. Retain rights whenever possible. Keep as many rights as possible, especially international territories and ancillary platforms such as, physical and theatrical, like I talked about earlier. If you're giving up distribution rights, limit the contract term to ensure you have reversion clauses. Negotiate fair terms. Include audit rights to ensure the transparent accounting, set caps on recoupable expenses, and avoid long-term all rights deals, especially with small or unknown distributors. So key takeaways here: excessive expenses, hidden fees, and long-term contracts are common predatory tactics. Always include expense caps, audit rights, and performance benchmarks in your contract. Research potential in distributors thoroughly and get legal counsel before signing any deal. Don't be swayed by unrealistic revenue splits or large MGs, promises without clear terms, and protect yourself by retaining as many rights as possible and setting clear reversion clauses. Whew, we made it. We're here. We're here at the end. So I wanted to leave you all with some final thoughts. This is a lot of information, and I'm still thinking about chopping it up into smaller sections too. So I'm going to edit the full version, and we'll see what happens from there. But I appreciate you guys sticking around with me. But let me leave you off with some thoughts here. So some really key takeaways: know your goals. If you want full creative and financial control, self-distribution or working with aggregators might be the best fit. If you're aiming for wider exposure, partnering with a distributor or using a hybrid model could offer more reach. And I just want to say too, like, I've used a lot of scary terms and I almost make it seem like distribution just sucks in general and you just shouldn't do it. That's not necessarily the case, but there's so many bad apples out there and so much misinformation that it's just best to know what you're getting into and having an idea of what to look out for before you start getting out there. Like, I talked to a lot of filmmakers who don't even know the difference between TVOD, AVOD, and SVOD, right? And they're wanting to go out into distribution, not knowing just the absolute basics of basics, right? So that's really important to know, and honestly why I made this video in general. Protect your rights. Always read the fine print on contracts and be cautious of predatory distributors. Negotiate caps on expenses and ensure you have clear terms for revenue splits. Leverage your network. Festivals, film markets, and direct outreach to distributors or sales agents can open doors. Don't be afraid to cold pitch your film. Just make sure you're prepared with a professional press kit and screener whenever possible, and stay flexible. The indie film market is constantly evolving. Be open to exploring new platforms, marketing strategies, revenue models as they emerge. And of course, my final tip here, distribution is a long, long game. Even if you don't land a big deal right away, focus on building your audience, marketing your film, and nurturing relationships in the industry. With the right strategy, patience, and persistence, you can get your film in front of the right audience and maximize its success. Whew. That does it for this video. I definitely appreciate all of you guys watching. Let me know if you made it here to the end. Let me know if you found this video useful. If you want to see more videos like this, like, do I need to break down things even further from here? Like I said, this is just a basic understanding of everything, but I definitely appreciate you guys watching. If you like this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. Of course, I have some other videos that will be linked below here to learn more about distribution methods. I'll link some, deliverable playlists or stuff about like Film Hub or anything like that somewhere down here. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one.